In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
It is 100% real. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA.
What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the Curious Dimension podcast, where we explore the mysteries of the unknown, delve into the fascinating world of UFO disclosure, sacred geometry, crop circles, and more. I am your host, Matt Barone. I hope that you've been enjoying the conversations as much as I have been hosting them. Don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps us reach more curious minds like yours. And if you want to stay updated with all our latest episodes, be sure to hammer that subscribe button. You won't want to miss any of the exciting discussions we have lined up. Finally, we love hearing from you. Drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's episode or any questions you might have. Your feedback means the world to me and helps shape future content. My guest today is Don Schmitt. Don has been a tireless investigator of the Roswell Incident and other UFO cases for decades. As a former director of special investigations for the J. Allen Hynek Center of UFO Studies, and co-author of several influential books on Roswell, including Witness to Roswell, he's known for his meticulous approach and dedication to uncovering the truth behind these phenomena. Today, we'll discuss Don's decades-long journey into the world of UFO investigations, challenges and breakthroughs he's encountered, and his thoughts on the current movement toward UAP transparency and disclosure. Don and I had a really fantastic conversation today. And without further ado, here's Don Schmitt. All right, Don, we are live now. Really want to thank you for taking the time to chat with me. There's a lot going on in the space of UAP, UFO disclosure. I want to talk to you today a little bit about Global Disclosure Day. Obviously, I want to talk about Witness to Roswell. But what I'd like to do is start off with maybe, could you just give people a brief introduction and how you got involved in this topic? Because your origin story, I think, goes back quite a way, and it touches on some of the most important people in ufology history. So could you give us a little brief intro?
I had the good fortune of being a special investigator for late Dr. J. Allen Hynek, who was consultant to the Air Force Project Blue Book. He then founded the Center for UFO Studies in Chicago, where I also served as the co-director, and then I was director of special investigations. I am the lead investigator at the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell. I've had now 7 best-selling books. The first was made in the Golden Globe nominated movie Roswell. And I've had the good fortune of lecturing all over the world on this subject. And I could not have had a better teacher, a better mentor, a better scientific director, and better friend. He will go down in history as being the foremost authority on the subject. So I still find myself to this day, whenever I go in through a situation, what would Alan say? What would Alan do? I love the fact that even after he passed, his wife, Mimi, the way she would often comment to me when we were involved with something, she'd go, "Alan would be so proud of you boys." And I'm going to do all I can to keep him proud.
So this is right after college that you meet J. Allen Hynek. And did you have an interest in this earlier in life? Or?
Yes, Corey, all the way back to high school. I bought the book, Flying Saucers, Serious Business. And all the words whitewash and cover up. And I had just heard that all pertaining to the Warren report regarding the Kennedy assassination. And because I was already intrigued with that. Wow, we're using the exact same words as far as attacking this report. And so I couldn't help but be intrigued. And then there was one specific chapter which was entitled, Who's Driving? And it was all these occupant reports. And then my next book was Flying Saucer Occupants. And Jim Lorenzen. And then it was all these reports from all over the world describing occupants. Close encounters of the third kind, as Dr. Hynek would label them. which was based on all of his research, Close Encounters of the Third Kind with Steven Spielberg. It became a situation. You're talking about the biggest story of the millennium here. And I like, even within the leaflet of the jacket of the Lorenzen book, which stated, you may not believe all of these accounts, but just imagine if one is true, just one. And I could say the same thing about our Roswell investigation. Just imagine of the over 600 interviews we've done, 600 witnesses who were either directly or indirectly involved. Just imagine just one of them is telling the truth. And again, we're talking about something so big. How do you walk away from that? How do you not get drawn in and become so captivated by the fact that wouldn't that just this disclosure, this acknowledgement, put us all back in our places that I always joke, as my good, dear, late departed, late friend, nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman would comment, just imagine life form and intelligence off the planet monitoring our daily television and radio transmissions, our satellite broadcasts. What is the dominant theme that comes across day in and day out, 24/7? That we are a barbaric race of individuals whose primary preoccupation is tribal warfare. And after just all these centuries existing on this planet, spaceship Earth, because with its limited resources and it's limited as far as supplies, that type of thing, that we are still hell-bent on self-extermination, self-extinction. Yeah, let's land on the White House front lawn and let's see how they react. Maybe, as Carl Jung had suggested, that maybe our dear planet is more of the universal insane asylum. All the crazies are here. You're prejudice for that.
There'd be a good argument for that. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a quick second to thank everybody who's been tuning into the shows. If you haven't already hit that like button or hammered that subscribe button, please do that now. It really helps the algorithm to let this show reach a wider audience. Yeah, please leave me a comment in the bottom. I'd love to hear what you guys think. Much love, guys. Obviously, there's structures in place to motivate human beings to do all the horrific things that you're describing there. And that's part of the problem. And I think this topic is one of those unique topics, as explosive as it is, as paradigm shifting as it is. It's that one sort of topic that can bring sort of the whole planet together and say, okay, guys, we're just one human species here. And we've also reached this technological point where we have the ability to feed everybody. We have the ability to take care of some of these massive problems. I had this conversation with Ryan Wood a couple weeks ago about, if there is advanced civilizations out there and they are monitoring, and I think there's enough evidence now to say that's 100% true. If they are monitoring, they probably don't want to engage with a group of individuals that haven't cleaned up their room yet. Can you feed everybody? Do you have the potential to destroy your planet without the wisdom to not do it? And so I think that brings me to, Global Disclosure Day. I want to get right into this because I think that was a very important thing that Danny and Jim are doing over there. And I know you're part of it over at Ubiquity. Can you touch on how important this is that they're making this big push and where you see that going?
I come into the entire situation, entire arrangement with the background of not only having witnessed Hynek have this carrot dangle numerous times about disclosure, whether it was after the Dexter Ann Arbor sightings in Michigan in 1966, and then Congressman, yet to be President Gerald Ford became rather he fell under pressure from his constituents about the whole swamp gas explanation that Hynek gave, not to the overall sightings at that time, but just to one particular event that happened over a marsh involving some farmland. And he never lived that down. The idea that here was the Air Force once again, Project Blue Book, just trying to sweep it all under the carpet with something as ridiculous as marsh gas, swamp gas. What is that even at that time? What is that? And so we learned, and I learned, we're playing with the big boys. I learned that very early, even with the Roswell investigation, that as much as I was a skeptic, and we were so confident we would go down to New Mexico and wrap this up in a single weekend, prove that it was nothing more than a balloon device as the government still maintains, or something just as prosaic. And I can say to your entire audience, we were wrong. We saw that we were wrong after the first. When you're listening to first-hand witnesses, both military and civilian, describe the characteristics of this exotic wreckage, these materials that defy conventional explanation, even by today's standards, 2024. And that's science. You go where the evidence leads you. I have too many colleagues that they have a preconceived theory, and then they set out to prove it. That's not science. We burn like at the stake over such things because we believe a set as far as dogma as to what we perceived, and we weren't about to let anybody upset that apple cart. So I love people that, and I hate the old Warren cliche, thinking outside the box, but that's exactly what it is. And I learned that even in art school, that an artist needs to know how far to take a painting, and they have to know when to quit. Too many don't take it farther enough, and too many overdo it. Mm-hmm. Too many people overanalyze. They need to step away, and that's the same thing in looking at a painting. You step back, you become an observer, and then you critique. And I have too many people that are friends that are so caught up in this that they become obsessed, and they prove something without all the pieces falling into place. And that's what we required of Roswell, that it had to be devoid of contradiction. It had to be, as far as virgin in the fact that it happened back in 1947, that the skies were rather pristine, and there wasn't anything else that could account for all the eyewitness testimonies. Today, there are hundreds of conceivable explanations. Okay. So we were very fortunate in that regard. So we then, in working with the late Congressman Stephen Schiff of New Mexico, and representing not only his constituents, but he became the champion in leading the charge towards congressional hearings on Roswell. And he would send 3 separate letters to then Secretary of Defense Les Aspin. Open the files. I want to see the files. Why are you withholding the files on this one case that has been readily explained away as nothing more than a balloon device? What's the big secret here? In their ignorance of even cooperating with the House of Representatives at that time, it just forced Schiff to press even further. Not only was he stonewalled by the White House, but then each branch of the military, and anyone who was a student of the subject knows how the Air Force, as Newsweek magazine very aptly called it, it was a preemptive strike when Colonel Richard Weaver, they had the press conference in September of 1994 at the Pentagon, where they came out with their new theory, and it would become the 3rd official explanation of Roswell. We're now up to 4. We're up to 4. I always joke that husbands try that with your wives when you come home too late at night. But it's the government. It's like they always provide another story to cover up their previous actions. And what I was able to bring to the table with Danny and with Jim and with the others, even with Lou Elizondo and with Hal Putoff and all the others involved, was this notion that, okay, let's not repeat the same mistakes we did before. Let's realize that we are essentially going to bed with the very arbiters of the cover-up.
Agreed.
People who have been responsible for this subterfuge. And we shouldn't expect them just to roll over and say, we're sorry, we
Right.
read it.
Right.
Realize that we can't trust them.
No, never.
Not at all. Never. You're absolutely correct, Matt. You
No.
cannot trust them because they've had now almost an 80-year as far as level of cover-up,
It's a fight.
of suppression, of intimidation, of fear, of threats. And so I wanted them to put aside that naivety. That, okay, they've agreed to talk to us. The point is, but they haven't agreed to talk to us. Again, just like with Schiff, they have stonewalled us at every stage. And they've always tried to have the last word. The difference this time is it isn't just a lone maverick as we had with Schiff. It was so sad that he could not enlist additional support on Capitol Hill.
Not going to get done.
Was still that taboo, that it was a career breaker, that it was, I'm trying to think of the presidential.
Political suicide.
No, Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich, during one of the debates, it was the first time that Obama, in the presidential debates, and even Hillary at that time, and the others involved, John, as far as Richard, trying to think was the governor of New Mexico at that time. But anyway, Kucinich mentioned that he had a UFO sighting. I believe it was in Massachusetts. Kiss of death. That was the end of his campaign right there. And so there's no question that all the others who witnessed that saw, whoa, we can't let this topic ever come up again. And so we had to let time pass once again. And that's why it was so crucial that in July 17th, that when that New York Times article broke, that it was a good way to test the waters once again. And what better place than the Times?
Oh, yeah.
And then to have the actual military witnesses who were free to talk about, as far as from the Navy, what had transpired, what had happened. And so we had learned. We realized that, first of all, we had to get the media to take the subject seriously. And then secondly, we had to have high-ranking military officers, witnesses, at the ready, who were willing to go on the record and describe their experiences. And then third, we needed to immediately turn the coin, flip it towards the possibility that would Congress, would Capitol Hill be actually willing to conduct hearings and provide an opportunity, a venue for these eyewitnesses to speak. Then we caught them one more time. We have to also, you can go back through lectures I've done, you can go to other interviews I've done, even before 2017, that the biggest problem we have faced, whether with our Roswell witnesses, and even up till today, and we could throw in as far as, and he's not, by definition, an actual whistleblower, and that would be David Grush. He's secondhand. He's repeating what others have told him. But what we were calling for now over 20 years is that these eyewitnesses have to be granted immunity. We cited specifically, there is a espionage clause that Congress can acknowledge, and then behind closed doors, they can secure testimony from eyewitnesses who are carrying security oaths, and then they can make a determination whether that information can be disclosed. So we're beyond that. Again, major accomplishment that for the first time, potential whistleblowers are now able to speak. They can be subpoenaed, and they can now testify under oath on the reality of this subject. Last time I had spoken with Grush, though, the law, as much as it has been proposed, it has not been enacted. as a result, he is still under pressure. He is still receiving threats.
To this day?
Yes, to this day. So he says, but I saw it with Roswell. I saw it with my witnesses. I saw it with, again, Congressman Schiff, what happened with him. And so it's the game they play. If we can get you to go away, if we can stall for time, we can run out the clock, maybe the press will move on. You'll give up. You'll be more. And my biggest regret in all of this, Matt, is that they waited too long. 15 years ago, 25 years ago, when we were working, we probably still had over 100 first-hand witnesses.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Each one of them, a potential whistleblower. Just imagine any one of them before a congressional committee describing the wreckage, describing the characteristics of what they held in their hands, and then those eyewitnesses to the non-human bodies, and then to the survivor. You talked about blowing this open overnight. And so I do this with a lot of remorse, but yet it still is an opportunity that we may never have again. We have to grab that ball and run with it with all the zest and all the gusto that we ever possessed. This is where the UFO community also needs to come together. Because if you feel you're going to solve this on your own, the data, the physical evidence exists. But who, again, is in possession of it? Great people that have striven, who have done all they can to make sure that it never sees the light of day. And we got to put on a full court press. We really do. We really do.
Yeah, this is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because you've seen this unfold over a long period of time, and you've seen these sort of little peaks and valleys within the subject. And I'm sure there was moments in your earlier days when you got really excited about things cracking wide open, and then you started to see the trade craft of the people that actually know this pushing back, and you started to learn how this can be delayed. Like you said, running out the clock. And that's an important strategy, especially when you come to Roswell, because in the early 90s, that's only 40 some years ago in the early 90s. So you had some people that were younger, that are still alive at that time.
Yes.
I think Sheridan Cavitt, you've got Bill Rickett, you've got Walter Hout, like some of these guys, Glenn Davis, some of these guys are still alive then. So, and like you said, if you spike the football then, you've just cracked this thing wide open. So as they push the time lock back, that's a major blow as you learn. Now, here we are. There's been some key things that have happened in the last 7 to 8 years, and there's an opportunity to drive this over the end zone, like you say. Can you talk a little bit about the upcoming hearings here on November 13th, and what do you expect from that, and what do you think is going to happen from that?
I'm hoping for more daylight. I'm hoping for, I don't like that word to begin with, hope, because that's an emotion. It's done. But what I want to see, because we have been told that they have actually conducted interviews with legitimate whistleblowers, that David Grush has named names. He's named his sources. These are the people that need to step forward. These are the people in being granted immunity. One thing when you speak off the record, and God knows we had many Roswell witnesses, this is not for public acknowledgement, public disclosure. Even that word is becoming a cliche. And so I want to be careful of that, because it's either with a capital D or a small d. And I'd be happy even with a lowercase, because again, it still would be a breakthrough. It would be a step forward. I think the greatest accomplishment we've had to date is that the taboo has been lifted. The media has never covered this subject before as they have within the last 5 years. And as a result, it's cool now to talk about it. The break room, the water cooler that everybody has. And I would always cite for example. And it was a quick way to always, when dealing with especially a TV or a radio host, the moment that they tried to get under my skin a little bit, and I would cite the fact that since the late 1970s, the Gallup poll continuously has demonstrated that the majority of Americans believe in the phenomenon, except that we were dealing with something that indeed may be off the planet. But I also point out that the higher the education, the higher the intelligence, the greater the belief. Stops them in their tracks immediately, because how do you come back from that? And so we've always been the right side, because all we have maintained is that this needs to be investigated. This needs to be acknowledged. And then again, let's see where the evidence takes us. And we accumulate the evidence from multiple sources. What the committee should not continue to rely on is the Pentagon. I always had commented, in fact, we put out a press release a number of years ago that the Pentagon never sends anyone up the Capitol Hill who may accidentally tell the truth. They always rely on those novices who have had lack of access. People that cannot accidentally tell the truth because they've never seen the truth. They've never had the high enough clearance to have access. So they're at no risk. I saw that with Roswell again. I saw that with Colonel Weaver. I saw that with Captain James McAndrew, who did the Project Mogul report, and then the anthropomorphic wooden crash dummies to address the bodies described at Roswell. They selected someone in the reserves, a lowly captain, who hardly would have had clearance for anything sensitive.
Right.
And he becomes an expert on mobile. He becomes an expert on the crash dummies. He knows nothing else. So
Right. He's not lying.
No. And that's the pattern that the Pentagon has demonstrated since World War II, over and over again. That's where I offer my experience. And as I have with Burchett and Luna and Grothman, the idea that, okay, you have to come at this with multiple sources. You have to be able to counter the Pentagon with eyewitness testimony, all anecdotal, but nonetheless, it has to be able to challenge the official record. And that's where the whistleblowers come in. Focus on specific individuals who can then challenge officialdom and can say, I'm willing to testify on this under risk perjury, that this is what I witnessed. These are the documents that I saw. These are the photographs. This is the film that I witnessed. Now, you either corroborate that or you are then going to perjure yourselves under oath. Again, this should be like a trial. And we see too often where congressional investigations become photo ops. That as long as the camera is rolling, congressman or congressperson after time on film, so they feel like they're leading the charge, that they're 5 minutes to really stand. That's not what's called. Really looking out for the little guy. It's a lot more than that with this subject. It's not quite World War III, but it's the type of thing that it could impede. It could actually cause us to grow up, to mature a little bit more, and that World War III would become obsolete. that nuclear weaponry would become, what are we fighting about and who's got the bigger stick? My God, there's something else out there. And they might squash us like bugs if we ever get to that point. And maybe we need to concede that we need to go back to school and learn from those who have already experienced all of this and have survived it. And how did you do it? How did you get past all your personal animosities and your fear? We're beyond the fear factor. And the reason I can always say that with the utmost assuredness is this idea that the government is just protecting us, the culture shock, the idea that we can't handle it. My God, we're being visited by an intelligence off the planet. And our generation, our generations have grown up with the space race, landing on the moon, Star Trek, Star Wars, the whole notion of life is extent, throughout the universe. And then I think the greatest evidence of that is back in 1947. That was unprecedented. There was nothing in the Army field manual about, crash of a flying saucer from another planet. And all of those people dealt with that. And all those people, they continued going to work. They continued going to church. They raised their families. They lived out their lives. There was no panic. There was no mass suicide. This was just 9 years after the War of the Worlds broadcast, so it was fresh in their minds. They thought, my God, is it happening again, or is it really happening this time? Mm-hmm. And they dealt with it. They experienced it firsthand, and they learned by it. But the bittersweet things they learned by it was, we can't trust the government. The military walked on water post-World War II. We just won World War II. We had just saved the world from Nazi Germany. We just saved the world from Imperial Japan. And here, 2 years later, we had physical evidence drop into our hands that we were not alone. And a handful of people decided for all time that we can't handle it. You shouldn't handle it. We have no, as Dr. Hynek was told by Donald Rumsfeld in his office in Washington, you have no right to know. You have no need to know. They still see it that way. And that's what Congress needs to do more than everything else, even beyond the immunity clause. How dare you withhold that information from us? You have been deceiving, you have been lying to us all these years, and it ends today. It's over now. And whatever congressperson finally puts it that way, finally says the deception is over, until they acknowledge that we've all been lied to, we've all been deceived, it's still going to be this little ballroom dance as to who's going to walk off the floor, the sprained ankle, that type of thing. It's hardball. We may never have this opportunity again. And that's why we have to hit them as hard as we can.
Yeah. And that's one of the things, one of the messages in Global Disclosure Day that it really centers everyone who is in this UFO community, because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of, it could be this, there's a lot, it could be that. There's all different types of phenomena going on, and people get distracted all the time. One of the things you guys are doing is you're keeping it focused on what we can get done, right? And what we can get done is massively significant. And I like the way that Danny is keeping it on an even keel. I know he's doing a lot of the major podcasts right now, and he's keeping it, obviously he's saying some very explosive things, but he's keeping it simple. And this is what we're trying to do. And he's telling all of these different wild stories that center around this thing, this topic that we call the UFO topic. And it's so important because this topic is so expansive. There's so many different aspects to it. You can get distracted real easily and start wasting time on something that's not going to actually make a real difference. And so when you focus on that and you get a group of people like Danny and Jim have done, like with you and Colonel Carl Nell and Richard Doland and these very intelligent people that have huge pieces of the puzzle and their voice matters, it's much different than a podcaster that's got 10 years of experience researching this thing, them saying it. It's different. It's the more people that come forward and say the explosive thing, the more credible it is. And I think it's going to get to a point where you have this, it's already happening. We're having this grassroots effort where so many people are just going to be aware of it. And so many people are saying the thing that major heavy hitter politicians come forward and there'll have to be an overt announcement. So I agree with you that the moment, and it needs to be drilled home. And everything that I sense and everything that I read about online and the different interviews I see, it seems like nobody's giving up. I don't think this topic is going away anytime soon. And I think the more it pushes forward, the more the people obfuscating the truth will show their strategies. That will become more transparent because they're going to push back. There's no way they're not going to push back. And so what it's going to do is they're going to push back, and then we're going to see how they're doing it, and we're going to learn more. And eventually, this ugliness is going to bubble to the top. And there'll just be so much information out there, so much interest that there'll be no choice. That's kind of the way I see it going.
And you are absolutely correct, Matt. I mean, your perception as far as overall is spot on. And those of us who are also historians of the subject, that we are able to go back and look at the fact that we've come full circle. If we look at September of 1947, the famous Twining letter, General Nathan Twining was head of the Air Material Command at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio at that time. And in the letter, when it stated that the phenomenon is real and not visionary or fictitious, and goes on to describe the shapes and the flight characteristics, and that clearly we were dealing with a sophisticated intelligence that we could not compete with. And even back then, the talk was, heaven help us if this is Soviet, this is Russian. We're in trouble. And then even with the very first project, before Blue Book, you had Project Sign, Grudge, Blue Book. What was the conclusion of Project Sign in 1949? That the phenomenon was real, that we were dealing most likely with something that was interplanetary. That was the word back then, not extraterrestrial, because we didn't have, as far as any knowledge of our own solar system at that time.
We hadn't gone into outer space at that point.
Precisely. We'd have satellites. And the notion that Mars, even Venus, could very well have been inhabited. So that was still very much in our psyche at that time. But then, as it became more of a concern of national security, the idea that we're losing control of this, and the CIA steps in 1953. And then with Project Blue Book, where they went out of the way, as Dr. Hynek would describe, to explain away every case at all cost. So it became quite evident that it had nothing to do with weighing the checks and balances, examining the evidence and seeing where it takes them. But they had an agenda, and the agenda was to cover this up and explain away the fact that they had no answers themselves. I still maintain, Matt, that it remains a cover-up of ignorance, that after all these years, they still don't know from who, from why, and from where. So what do they disclose? That's the double jeopardy that they're facing. They can acknowledge, yes, there is a phenomenon, and there is something that they've always tried to placate as far as the public, in that we're sure it's still something within our genre, something that, may be Chinese, may be Russian. It may be even something advanced of our own technology, maybe black ops, black operations that it cannot be revealed at this time. But that's still keeping it within their level of control, because the moment they look to the phenomena for answers, that's where they run into a brick wall. And I believe to this day, they still cannot find the on button. What was ever recovered at Roswell, they have not been able to replicate the technology. We don't have a fleet of flying saucers that are out there with air supremacy throughout the world. No. And so it continues to demonstrate to me that it's a mutual ignorance. And the Pentagon is the last bastion of national security that would ever acknowledge that there's something there and we can't do anything about it.
And I think that's something you just mentioned there. Have they gained any insights off of this? I think there's probably something to talk about there. But again, I think that's a distraction from the overall point of this, because clearly there's aerospace companies that have gone without oversight. And sure, and I guarantee you they've gained some sort of insight off of something of it, that those conversations can be had. But I think that's, I don't want to say it's a distraction. I think people should have that conversation. But also, I think that takes away what's really important and what really could be, because the acknowledgement that we're not alone, the acknowledgement that there is another intelligent species somewhere that's either has been here all along, or is from another star, or is from another timeline, whatever you want to research on that. That is so explosive. That is so paradigm shifting that I think people would have to take a second and rethink about their place on the planet. And my hope would be that people would think we're one human family. And maybe from that one idea, people could start to change about how they interact. And we'll stop seeing ourselves as like adversaries, foreign adversaries, and start working together so that we can go and put our time, money, and energy into exploring the stars, educating everyone, feeding everyone. We should be doing that first. But one of the things I think this topic will do will help accelerate that. That's my opinion. Yeah, I don't know.
No, it's a good opinion. And when you consider we haven't been to the moon in 50 years, just imagine if the program would have continued unabated up to this. We would be on Mars. If you look back at the projections back when during the Kennedy administration, and the goal at that time was to be on the moon. 1970, we met that challenge. The next goal was we were to be on Mars by 1980. So 1980, that's 40 years ago. And now they're still talking that maybe in the next 25 years we might, and those are opportunities. Politicians, unfortunately, would step in and have the final word. Obviously, they control the purse strings. That has been diminished to the point that they can't even send a rocket up to rescue as far as some of the astronauts, as far as in the space lab, because we don't have anything as far as even a standby that we're going to rely on as far as Musk and Richard Branson and others that help them out, because, and maybe that is the future, that space exploration will be more within the civilian, the private corporations, that type of thing. And as I believe it should be. Keep the government out of it, because the government, everything moves at a snail's pace. I think a great example that I always cite, that when you had the Challenger or the Columbia, every time you had a disaster, you had a tragedy involving one of the shuttles, it shuts down the program for 3 years. And yet you could have a plane crash and 300 people could be killed, but that plane goes right back up. It just continues to demonstrate that the worst people you will want calling the shots on most anything. Just imagine if the government totally controlled the medical practice. Just imagine if the government controlled as far as the NFL. We know how as far as like with the internet, the idea like with the podcast and everything, that you're now able to say and do really whatever you want on most any subject. But before that, everything is controlled by the FCC. And as a result, you had to get licensed and you could get fined and you could have your license removed. And so the government, it has its place, but we need to also demonstrate that when it comes to this subject, that the government has been nothing but a distraction. The government has done nothing but run interference and set up obstacle after obstacle as far as towards the truth. And that if not for the UFO community, press all this time, if not for the bravery of the witnesses who have stepped forward, power in numbers. They can't all be lying, as Hynek would say. They can't all be wrong. They observed something that was advanced beyond our technology, and they have no explanation. Unfortunately, they also have no proof. We have to go back to the well. Congress, with the hearings, they have to once again go back to the wall. But they have to come with a playbook. They have to come back as far as with eyewitnesses. They have to come with the advantage of every time the Pentagon gives us an excuse for point A, we are ready with B, C, D, and so on. That the chess match, we will come in to win. Not just, again, go through the motions as Congress so often does. We gave it our best shot. We did all we could, and we came up empty-handed. No, we can't allow them to once again just walk away and say, we have to believe them. No, we don't. Their track record is dismal. And they're covering up, again, the biggest story of the millennium. We can't let them get away with this.
No
more.
We can't. And Don, those are amazing words right there. And I can sense your determination in here. And I know you've spent a long time with this, and I know that this is an opportunity, and I can sense that as well. We got about 10 minutes left. I want to just talk a little bit about, so I'm an educator by trade, and I see my students all the time, and I see what's inspiring them these days. Can you just talk to us a little bit about in like the 60s and early 70s when there is this, the United States ran away with the space race. We started sending people up, going to the moon. Can you talk about, number one, how inspiring that is for young people to see that? We have doctors, people with PhDs going into space. This is our beginning of exploring the cosmos. And we don't see that much anymore. Now we have Elon Musk, and he's starting to do these things. This inspiration, this topic, I think can inspire young kids. But can you just talk about that time period? Because you were young at that time, you saw this happening. How inspiring is that as a nation to motivate young people to get involved in science, technology, engineering, mathematics? Can you talk about that time period and how we could possibly get back to that through this topic?
I've often remarked that we've lost our pioneer. The idea that what's beyond the next hill, what's beyond the next mountain, what's beyond the next ocean, that type of thing. We feel that we've accomplished all that there is to accomplish within just a matter of a few hundred years, as much as the United States has existed. I so look forward to breakthroughs in medicine that are beyond the pharmaceutical companies controlling the level of treatments in conjunction to prevention, for example. And the idea that just as we accept that there's a positive, that there is a negative, and then what are we dealing with here? Will it provide a negative outcome, or should we be striving all the more urgently, ardently towards a good result, a positive result? I've grown up with this idea that not throwing as much money as you can at a problem, but enough brain power coming together for a resolution that you then devise a plan of action and you solve the dilemma. That's where we are today. We have issues. You mentioned that at the beginning of the show, Matt, that we could feed everybody on the planet. There's no doubt of that. The oceans alone, just imagine right there what we could accomplish and what we could accomplish as far as with free energy. The idea that even back in 1947, where the powers that be, and already were questioning whether these craft were electromagnetic, that they were anti-gravity, that they essentially could draw power right out of the atmosphere. And that is simple as you could take a balloon, rub it on your arm, and it will stick up against the wall. So just static electricity, electromagnetism, the idea that they've been experimenting with anti-gravity since right after World War II. We need to focus those major breakthroughs, free energies, starvation, feeding all people, the basics that then enable people to fulfill life's missions, to accomplish things that we've never done before. We should be on the moon. We should have a base on the moon. We should be launching as far as rockets from the moon in near zero gravity, where we could then go on to Mars within weeks and not months, that type of thing. Every time, and I love the fact you mentioned Elon Musk again, and when to watch that video of that rocket returning back to the launch pad, my God. And yes, because we can do that.
Mhm.
It's just a matter of, as long as hatred prevails, as long as finger pointing, doubt, skepticism, and anger always rise as being the predominant emotion, we start to digress as a race. We start going backwards, and we have gone backwards. And that's so sad, because I'd like to believe our best years are ahead of us. I'd like to believe that for the children and the grandchildren, because otherwise, what are we bequeathing them? What are we leaving them? And that's why, just imagine, we are successful with disclosure. We're able to demonstrate that, yes, we are being visited by an intelligence off the planet. And from all indications, they are not malevolent. They have had every opportunity to play their hand, and they haven't. They may be here as observers, but they may also be here to help us, to intercede if necessary, to teach us in a way that if they could make it, so could we. And as a result, we have to mature beyond our hatreds, our skepticisms, our fears of the unknown. And once again, get on that ship and cross that ocean. Crawl as far as climb that mountain. Go to the moon, go to Mars, go beyond. Because those are the events that have always brought us together. Those are the events that we are no longer competing as far as a species. We able to look up and go, nothing's impossible. I see too many people scanning as they walk at the ground. No. I want people walking with their heads up. I tell children when I give lectures, as far as even young people, go outside late at night if your parents are with you, and just wave up at the stars and just think maybe there's some little boy somewhere else waving back at you. It's refreshing, it's renewing, it's illuminating. And that's what is missing. It's missing in the classrooms. It certainly is missing as far as in the government. The people should still be the government. We still need to be calling the shots. And one of the main reasons we are where we presently are is because too many of us have sat on the sidelines and we watched as it has been ripped away from us right in front of our eyes. Let's take it back. Let's take it back, and specifically right now with disclosure, with the idea that We have hearings, we have additional hearings forthcoming, and that these are opportunities that are way beyond even the scope of the UFO, UAP phenomenon. It's the very survival of the planet. It's that important to me, and I know it's that important to all the other people at New Paradigm.
Don, I don't know what to say. That was a great way to end this. I really want to thank you for your grit, your perseverance, your longevity in this topic, and your determination to get this done. It's very inspiring, and everyone should be happy that there's people like you out there and everyone else with New Paradigm Institute to help push this along and get this information out and have us get that capital D disclosure one day. Because I do think it's very important. I do think it's paradigm shifting. And I think it's one of the few subjects where everybody can come together and make this place a little bit better. I really want to thank you for coming on, Don, and sharing your thoughts and your experience. Do you have anything else you want to say? Can you tell people where to find you, tell about your books, things like that?
At Ubiquity University, as far as I have my last class for this quarter on Roswell, and then I'm looking to putting together another curriculum for next spring, and then hopefully beyond that. So that, and I'm on Facebook at Donald Raymond Schmitt. We did have a website, but it was hacked by Chinese gambling. Just imagine, you go to Roswell Investigator, and it's a gambling site. RoswellInvestigator.com. So, and then certainly the International UFO Museum and Research Center in Roswell, New Mexico. And they just had the terrible flooding there, and the museum didn't sustain any damage, but the whole community, the whole city could use support right now, if not just by, we invite you all to come see us at the museum. We're approaching 6 million visitors. And we've created something that is accessible. We have a research center that with our files and our library, I should quickly, and I'll end with this. Our museum in Roswell, we have the second largest UFO library in the world, second largest.
Wow.
Who would you guess has the largest?
Somewhere in DC?
The Vatican.
Oh, the Vatican. I should have known that.
I always joke they had a few years head start on us. So that's something we're also working in conjunction with. This is becoming global. And so we'll do this again, Matt, and next time we'll even talk about, because we have the global initiative, and I'm also the North American representative of the International Coalition on extraterrestrial research, ICER. So we can go beyond even DC. We can demonstrate that we're going to come at this from every country, every direction we can.
Fantastic. Don, I look forward to that. I want to thank everybody for watching. Check out Don on Facebook, and hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you, Don.
Thanks so much, Matt. Do it again. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the show. I hope you guys are enjoying the content. If you're finding any value, please hit that subscribe button, that like button, and leave a comment. It doesn't cost you anything, and it really helps out the show.